Hello, I've been asked to do a tutorial on some embroidery basics, so today we're going to talk a little bit about stabilizers. So first, let's go over some references which are available to you. You may not have opened your operation manual since you bought your machine, but if you check it out, you'll find that there is usually a stabilizer chart in there. It'll tell you what fabric and stabilizer recommendations. I also like this printout from Floriani. If you go to their website, it's available as a free download. It'll again go over fabric type and then talk a little bit about the design, a solid or an open and airy design, and recommend various stabilizers to match your project needs. They also give you a nice summary of all of their products and tell you a little bit about how or where to use them. So these are some references you can always come back to. Now, regardless of what stabilizer you're using, you always want to make sure that your stabilizer is at least 1 to 2 inches larger than your hoop. If it's not a little bit larger than your hoop, it won't be caught by the edges of the hoop, it won't be held securely, things will shift while you're stitching, and you won't have a nice finished project. So again, you always need to make sure your stabilizer is a little bit larger than your hoop. You also want to fuse your stabilizer to your fabric. It will give you a much nicer finished project. If you don't fuse your stabilizer, your fabric will shift while it's being embroidered, and again, you won't have a nice finished project. This is an iron-on stabilizer. If you look, you can see it's a little bit shiny on the one side. That goes against your fabric. You press down with the iron, and you actually do want to literally press with the iron. Hold it for about 3 seconds, and then start from the center and move your way out to the edges until the stabilizer is secured to all of your fabric. There's some other solutions for fusing your stabilizer to your fabric. There's a peel and stick. You peel off the backing, and then you can stick your fabric or material to that. And there's also some which are wet and stick. So this has a glue on there that's activated with a little bit of water, and then your fabric will stick to that. The peel and stick and the wet and stick are particularly nice if you have to float your fabric on top of your hoop. So if, for example, you're doing a towel, they're a little bulky, sometimes they're hard to get in your hoop. Or when I did these balsa wood signs, those obviously you can't hoop because they're wood. So you want to put the stabilizer in the hoop and then wet it or peel it, and then you can stick your fabric or your material to the stabilizer that's already in the hoop. This product by Floriani actually has some cute little hash marks on it. If you line that up with your hoop, you can then line up your fabric with this, and that will help ensure that your design is stitched straight. So, fabric larger than your hoop, fuse your material to the stabilizer. Now, there's stabilizer and there's topping. We'll talk about topping in just a minute. I'm going to start with the stabilizer. You've got cutaway, wash away, and tear away. Now, this is some cutaway. This is usually used on clothing or any kind of fabric that's stretchy. So any kind of knit or t-shirt material, something that's going to stretch when you pull on it, you really want to use the cutaway. And of course, to remove this, you're going to use some scissors to trim or pull it away. There's also wash away. The wash away, again, it should look like a piece of fabric, and this will disappear completely when you add water. It's great for when you're doing freestanding lace, or for example, these mug rugs where they're finished in the hoop and you don't want the stabilizer sticking out the edges of the design. So the wash away, you remove this by dipping it in water and it will dissolve completely. So for freestanding lace or where you're finishing in the hoop and need a smooth edge. So that's our wash away, our cutaway, and then that leaves our tear away. And the tear away is used for pretty much everything else. And to remove that, you just simply grab it and rip it, and it should tear away cleanly at the edges of your embroidery. Now you might find if you have a very open design, a lot of thin stitching, that the tear away can start to pull on that. And there is one other product, and it's called like a stitch and wash or tear and wash. It's kind of a cross between tear away and wash away. So instead of just pulling it to get it off, you actually spritz it with a little bit of water on the back of your design on the stabilizer and then pull it away, and it'll come away a little more cleanly along those thin stitching lines without pulling them out. So this is a little bit of a specialty project, but it works nice. Now I do use some plain tearaway that has no fusibility. I use that for projects where you start with just plain stabilizer in the hoops, such as key fobs or your zippered bags. That works great for those. It's also helpful for if you want to float stabilizer under your design. So if your design is over about 20,000 stitches, that's more than most stabilizer can handle nicely. It's going to start to pull a little. So what you do is you put your stabilizer on the back of your fabric, you hoop your fabric and your stabilizer in the hoop, you put your hoop in the machine, and then you would simply take a layer of stabilizer and slide it between your hoop and the base of your machine. And that's called floating your stabilizer, and that will help support the fabric when the design is over about 20,000 stitches. So those are our basic stabilizers. Let me just talk a moment about toppings now. So your toppings here, these go on top of your fabric. You lay them right on top of the design on, so you put it in the hoop and then you put that on the top. Those are helpful if you have a material which has a lot of plush or nap to it, such as a towel or faux fur. It will help to hold the nap down so that your embroidery will come out more smooth. Now for towels, some people actually like, this one is actually a heat away, so you use the iron to get rid of it as opposed to water. That means that when you wash your towels, that will stay in place, which will help ensure that the nap doesn't start popping up after a few washings. You also want to use this if you've got a material, a thinner, fine material, something like, say, this organza, or even balsa wood, which is very soft. And if you stitch without the topping on these, the stitches sink too far down into your fabric and you'll almost lose the stitching in the fabric. So you put the stabilizer on top of this and then do the embroidery. Actually, for balsa wood, I use 2 layers of the wash away stabilizer. Now with your topping stabilizers, if you look at them, you'll see that there's a smooth side and the other side which has a little bit of a bump on it. And you want to put the bumpy side next to your fabric. That will help keep the topping and the stitches from sinking into the fabric. So the bumpy side goes next to the fabric. So always have your stabilizer a little larger than the hoop. Fuse your stabilizer if you can. Cut away for anything that's stretchy. Wash away when you want it to disappear completely. Tear away for everything else. Now I'm going to tell you a couple of other tips or tricks that I do. One is I like to take the little pamphlet or material or tag from my stabilizer and I tuck it down into the center of the tube, and that way when I come back, if I can't remember what kind of stabilizer this is, I can always pull this out and double check. So that helps you keep track of what stabilizer is what. Now to cut my stabilizer, I recommend that you use your cutting board. It's easier to do and it works fine. So I simply put your stabilizer down and line it up along the edge of your stabilizer along one of your lines here. And then just use I like my rotary cutter for this, and I just roll straight up along that line and stitch. If you have trouble rolling straight, you can always put your edge down and cut along that. And now for this, I happen to need some of this, and I only need it for like my 4x4 hoop. So I'm just going to cut that again, so I've got 2 little pieces ready to go. And you can always remember that the bumpy side goes towards the fabric. Now, one of the tips or tricks that I like to do with my tearaway, won't work with the cutaway or the wash away, but for the tearaway, I actually use one of these little envelope cutters. You get them free from a lot of places. And it just saves your rotary cutter that you have to pay for the rotary blades. So this is a nice way. So I need a piece that's 9 inches wide. So I'm going to line up the stabilizer with my bottom edge. And I'm going to take this and usually give just a little bit of a press to get it started. And then you can kind of see the line there through. So I'm just going to, run this straight up that line and cut my tearaway that way. Again, it just saves my rotary blades a little bit to use these. And For this, I actually only need it 10 inches wide. It's for that 4x4 hoop. So I'll do the same thing again to cut it in half here. Just simply run up and follow along that line. And you can save your rotary blade a little bit. So that should fit my hoop nicely. Again, always make sure your stabilizer is a little larger than the hoop. Fuse it when you can. Cut away for something stretchy. Wash away if you need it to disappear completely, like your freestanding lace projects. Tearaway covers most everything else. You really want to use a topping if your fabric has a lot of nap to it, such as for towels or faux fur, or if your fabric is particularly thin or fine so that it will keep the thread from sinking too deeply down into the fabric. So I hope this has been helpful. If so, please check out my channel. I'll have tutorials for hooping and one which goes over some machine basics as well. So I hope today's lesson has been helpful. If so, please like and share, and please subscribe to this channel for more embroidery basics and in the hoop projects from LLH Embroidery. Thanks and happy stitching.